In this video, I go between extremes of ethical and unethical. It may look black and white, however keep in mind that there can be a grey area and people don't necessarily use all one side or the other. Hi everyone, welcome back to Dweller of the Earth. This is Jessica. I just want to tell you today about something called the influence continuum. In my last video, which was about emotional control, I said that my next video would be about the influence continuum. Now, if you're not sure what I'm referring to, you can take a look at my previous few videos on the BITE model, which is by Steven Hassan. Now, the BITE model goes through 4 different kinds of mind control or undue influence. So there is behavior control, which is the B, information control, which is the I, and then we have thought control, and then of course we have emotional control. Now, the BITE model is a really helpful tool and you can apply it to anyone, to individuals, to leaders, to organizations, practically anywhere, to the education system. The list really goes on and is quite extensive. So if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend taking a look through those videos so that you're better equipped with the information necessary to be able to spot behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control, all parts of undue influence. And of course, undue influence is the legal term for mind control. Many people think mind control is some kind of conspiracy theory, but it really is a reality. We are influenced by people unduly all the time. It could be a salesperson, it could be anybody really, it could be a religious leader. So mind control happens on all sorts of levels, and it's really important that you understand exactly what is going on when someone is unduly influencing you, because this is not something that you learn in school. In fact, a lot of the time you might find teachers or people in school, in leadership authorities, or right at the top, people you'd never even meet in your life, but the people running the education system, tends to be quite political, and sometimes within those organizations, within those politics, some of those leaders might be practicing undue influence or mind control. So they're obviously not going to give you this knowledge so that you're able to read through it. It took someone like Steven Hassan, who was in a cult, he was in the Moonies cult, to break free and eventually come up with information that he could share with people so that they can better equip themselves with this information. So thank you very much, and please proceed with the rest of the video to find out the difference between unethical influence and, well, which would be undue influence, which is on the destructive side, and then ethical influence, because we're influenced all the time. I'm going to begin by talking about individuals. So from person to person, on an individual scale, you might meet a controlling person, you might meet someone who is clearly trying to influence you in some way, but you don't know if it's a positive thing or not. Let's go down the list. First of all, I'm going to start by saying that on one end, this person will encourage you to be yourself. You will be encouraged to be your authentic self, and that's the positive influence. So if you feel like your true self is being brought out with this person, it's likely that they're influencing you in an ethical way, because they're trying to tap into your true essence, and they're trying to get you to utilize your resources that you already have. But on the other end, on the destructive end, which would be the undue influence side, we have a person who doesn't want you to be yourself. This person instead wants you to have a false cult-like identity, and they would actually try to demolish your real self and try to convince you in some way that this is who you're supposed to be on this side. This is who you are. And they will basically brainwash you using a lot of the methods that I mentioned in previous videos. This is why it's important to watch them from the BITE model. So a false cult identity on the destructive end, and your authentic self being brought out on the positive, constructive end. Then we have unconditional love versus conditional love. So on one end, of course, you can tell which end that is, the constructive side. We have unconditional love. Whatever you do, even if you do something that you regret and it's horrible, love is still there. You're still appreciated, you're still loved, but it's without conditions. Obviously boundaries can still take place, so just remember there's a difference between having boundaries, personal boundaries, and having love for someone. You can love someone and have boundaries as well. So to love someone unconditionally is one thing, to feel affection, a strong sense of affection for them. That never goes away when it's ethical influence. But when it's undue influence, you feel like you are not loved if you do things a particular way, even if it's not bad. If it's just something that the influencer doesn't want you to feel, doesn't want you to act like, doesn't want you to be like, they withdraw love. In fact, they may become very cold because they have conditions. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, you don't get my love. So that's how that works. Now, of course, we have conscience versus doctrine. Now, conscience, on the positive end, will be encouraged. The person influencing you wants you to make the quiet little voice in the back of your mind louder. They want to bring that to the forefront. Listen to your intuition, listen to your conscience, that little voice at the back of your head that tells you right from wrong. They will want to bring that out of you. They will want to make sure that you're able to listen to your conscience. On the other end, it's forget your conscience. Even if your conscience says one thing, if that contradicts the doctrine that I'm presenting to you, the unethical influencer will choose doctrine always over conscience. So forget your conscience, go with the doctrine. We also have creativity and humor being used on the ethical side, whereas fear and guilt are often the feelings that come about when you're being unduly influenced. So when you're being unduly influenced, you're going to find that a lot of the time it's based on fear. Actions being taken toward you or around you that make you feel fearful. You also have guilt, of course, so if you're feeling guilty a lot of the time and like something's wrong with you and you're not okay, there's a good chance that the person talking to you is unethically influencing you. On the other end, of course, like I said before, we've got creativity and humor. So that's something that's more brought to the forefront. You're able to be creative, you're able to be yourself, and humor is used, and you laugh a lot. It's like a positive reinforcer. Creativity, imagination, all of these things are more emphasized, and you don't really feel that fear and guilt in relation to the person influencing you. And of course, on the unethical influence side, we also have dependency and obedience. So the person really just wants you to depend on them, to be obedient to them, and that's why you're going to have that more. You're not going to really be able to question yourself. But an ethical influencer will want you to critically think and to have your free will. They want you to try things out for yourself, and you won't feel like you have to depend on them and be obedient to them. So keep that in mind. If you feel like you have to ask permission, or you have to kind of like, oh, I don't know what to think, and it's almost like your critical mind has been suppressed, you're not allowed to think for yourself anymore, that's a clear sign that you're being unduly influenced. So that's on that side of the spectrum. And then, of course, we have leaders. So you see it all the time in leadership positions, and I cannot stress this enough. It's huge. There are a lot of unethical influences in leadership positions, but of course, you also see people who are really good ethical influencers who are more constructive in the way they handle things. And this is also some good advice for you if you're planning on being a leader of some kind, to be able to follow along the ethical influence side of things. So ethically, you would be psychologically healthy. It's really important that you would have your ego in check, and you would be able to know, okay, I can be self-reflective, and you're able to see yourself. So you're able to have a third person point of view. That's an ethical influencer. On the other end, you're going to see a very egotistical kind of person who it's all about them, and while it's all about them, they don't really self-reflect, ironically. People refer to this as narcissism, or being a psychopath. I prefer not to label people in that way because I just have some issues with the mental health system and the way they choose to label people. Anyway, enough of that. On that end, yeah, we've got unethical influence. We've got an egotistical person, ego-driven person who may even be quite sadistic with their actions, or they may not care if someone gets hurt. That's a psychologically unhealthy person. And along those lines too, the next point would be that the ethical influencer knows their own limits. I'm not at the point where I can do that yet. Maybe one day, but I still have some growing to do. That's the kind of thing they will be able to admit to themselves, whereas an unethical influencer does not know their own limits. In fact, they have an elitist mentality, and they have grandiose ideas of what they are capable of. Their capabilities are so large, and they may even feel belittled. If someone They may even have like a pity story, like, no one really understands how good I am. They never really see my worth. They never really see my intelligence and what I'm capable of. Now, that's quite covert, but it's something that unethical influencers often do to emphasize their grandiosity. And they might be overtly grandiose, so they might outright tell you, I can do like everything, and in fact I can do it so well, I can do it better than everyone else. That's what I'm talking about. The ethical influencer, of course, will want to empower people. They're about empowering others. They are sharing their resources out. It's about empowering the system, the people around them. Whereas on the unethical side, quite clearly, we have power-hungry people. They will do anything for their own personal power, and they reserve that for themselves, at the expense of others, basically. An ethical influencer will be, of course, trustworthy, and you'll know because they'll be honest. On the other end, you've got deceptiveness, you've got secrecy, and you feel like you don't really know the person very well, or that things that they're supposed to be telling you are being withheld, and it's very, very hard to crack the person and to get basic information that you should be able to know. The unethical influencer will claim absolute authority. They are not accountable for their own actions. On the other end, you have an ethical influencer, someone who is constructive in the way they influence people. A very constructive leader will actually take accountability for their own actions, so watch out for those two extremes as well. Alright, and then we have organizations, but also relationships. So keep in mind that what I'm about to tell you it could be in relationships of any kind, but it can also apply to organizations. An organization that is destructive will have an authoritarian structure. You feel like you're almost in some kind of totalitarian society. Then of course we have checks and balances, making sure power is equally distributed. So of course again we have deception and manipulation on the unethical influence side, on the destructive side. You often be manipulated into doing things, even if it may look like you're being asked for consent. Often it's manipulated out of you, so you feel like, I didn't really want to do this, but now I feel like I have to. But on the ethical influence side of things, you've got, of course, you feel like, yes, I've been given consent, I've been informed, I have all the information necessary, nothing's been kept from me, nothing's been, I can see everything, there's no little fine print or miswording, misrepresentation of something. Everything was clear cut, you understand, and you were given consent, and you agreed to do something, and you did it. Ethical influence, unethical. And then we have the encouragement of individuality and diversity. So you can be yourself, you have your own personal hobbies, you have your own personal interests, you may have thoughts of your own, and of course you can be very creative, and you have a mind of your own, you have a world of experience, and a lifetime of experience that has made you who you are. And who you are differs somewhat from other people, and that is encouraged. You have that diversity of culture, of other things too. But on the unethical influence side, you'll be a clone, or you feel like you're the person, the organization, or in the relationship, you're being cloned in a way. So your personality is somewhat like the other people's, and you're becoming more and more like them, or you feel like you need to become more and more like them, because there's a kind of conformist mentality where you're not allowed to have and express your own diversity and individuality. Then we have on the ethical side of things, on that side of the continuum, we have that the means create the end. So I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to be very mindful of the way I do it, and that's going to bring me a mindful, positive result. So means create end. Unethical influence, end justifies the means. So we want this result, and we can do anything to get there. It's justified as long as we get that result, as long as we meet that particular end. Growth will be encouraged on the ethical side of things, and on the destructive, unethical side of things, it will be a preservation of personal power. So the organization will preserve and keep that power for themselves. Other people are not allowed to grow. But if you see a lot of growth in an organization or in a relationship, and you feel like, yes, I'm blooming, I'm allowed to grow, and the person I'm with or the organization I'm with is growing as well, and not at the expense of anyone else, just everyone's allowed to grow. That's ethical. On the unethical side of things, there'll be one person or a select few people preserving that power for themselves. And last but not least, we have, are you allowed to leave? Do you feel like you can leave? On the ethical side of things, of course, you feel like you're free to leave whenever you want. You're free to leave the organization. You don't feel like, if I leave, I'm going to have all these horrible consequences and I just can't do it. But on the ethical side of things, it's like that you feel like you have no legitimate reason to leave. And oftentimes that comes along with all the other things like the guilt and other methods of manipulation that I've mentioned in previous videos when I talked about the bite model. So please do look at those videos. I think they're going to really help you understand a little bit more about what this means. So you're going to notice that you just feel tied, like you're in shackles, like you can't leave the relationship or you can't leave the organization. And that's how you know it's unethical. But the chances are you do have a very legitimate reason to leave, and that's because you're being unduly influenced. So keep that in mind, and I hope you have benefited somewhat from this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe, and please turn on that little notification bell so that whenever I upload a new video, you'll be notified instantly. Have a wonderful day.